Hey there, welcome to Brian's Hobbies. So I was cleaning up around the bench and happened upon this chunk of cardboard that was from a previous project and just popped in my head, display base. So I just started gathering up some scrap pieces of foam I had laying around and hot glued them to the cardboard because I have no idea what this thing's going to look like. I just, freeform here. I'm going to just make it up as we go along. My last big build, and big being a relative term here, was the stasis pod on an alien planet diorama that I really enjoyed that one, and it was mostly the big part of it was the foam, and I want to play around with that some more and explore this material as a medium and just see what we can do with it. Also, it's the weekend, and wanted to spend a couple of days in the studio while I've got time, and what better way to do that than let's build something. This also gave me the opportunity to get out my DIY hot wire foam cutter and you get to use a new tool that you made yourself. That's always fun. At this point, I still have no idea what this thing's going to look like, but I have sort of how do I put this? It's just going to let it flow. That's sort of the beauty of this, is that it's unlike a model kit where you have a very rigid set of instructions that you can choose to follow or not. There's no rules here. Just let it go and see what comes of it. Now, this is not to say there aren't parameters that will limit what you're making. So, I've got an idea. The biggest limiting parameter to this project is that it's going to be a display base. So therefore, it has to have the ability to display something. Other than that, I really don't know what's going to happen and what it's going to look like. So when I was laying down the foam pieces, it's obvious that they're kind of uneven and the edges are jagged, and we want to clean that up a little bit. So I intentionally let the foam stick out over the edge of the cardboard just a little bit in places, and then with the intention of cleaning that up. So we're at that point, so I want to clean those edges up, but I don't trust myself to do that freehand. So I wanted to rig up something with my hot wire cutter that would allow me to, treat it more like a table saw or one of those tabletop foam cutters that I think Proxxon makes a really nice one that I'm coveting at the moment. Ooh, this gives me the opportunity to talk about jerry rigging, a term that has roots going all the way back into Middle English and nautical terminology that developed during those early centuries of sailing as ships became more and more complicated and had to be repaired on the go. You're in the middle of the ocean, something breaks, you got to fix it, and the only thing you've got to fix it with is the stuff on board. So, jerry rigging, or how to make a tabletop foam cutter out of some junk you got laying around. At this point, my vision, if you will, is sort of leaning towards abandoned ancient industrial. If you'll notice that little pile of cardboard off to the right there, that was a exploration into an idea of creating something, square, as the man-made objects have right angles in most cases, somewhere on them, but I quickly abandoned that for some more foam. As you would expect an industrial ruin to look like, you want bricks or blocks, and in this case I was going for a sort of a stonemason look, and already had an idea of how I wanted the sort of the backdrop, if you will, of this base to look like. As I'm imagining the history of the ruins, they're becoming buried, as objects do over time. If you leave anything abandoned long enough, the dust and debris of the world will collect enough on top of it that it will eventually just disappear underground. So to enhance that look, I decided to cut some pockets to set the cubes down into that would sort of mimic that look of being buried over time, but not too much time. So I'm just eyeballing it here, but I cut out the pockets so that they were basically level with each other, so that the bases would appear to be on the same level while the ground was sloping slightly. I freely admit to being a bit of a, I don't know, scatterbrain when it comes to the interest I have, and that they are wide and varied. Like, for instance, stonemasonry. I know that you want to chamfer the corners on these. Although I've studied stonemasonry, this is as close as I've ever been to actually performing some stonemasonry. It's on a piece of styrofoam. Another quick tool tip is this Alvin dusting brush. It's perfect for my bench, and it's like, I think, $6 and change. So it's really inexpensive for what it does. I debated on whether or not to leave this part in, but I guess it's part of the process. Again, my original vision for this, when it popped into my head, was ancient industrial ruins. So I went looking for things and objects that would, fit that vision, if you will, and came across this piece of tubing. And I thought, into pipings. So playing around with it for a couple minutes, decided it needed some structure, so found a chunk of old copper wire that you use for armature. Then got out my little hole cutters and made a couple of holes in the top of the columns to accept the tubing. Then after a little bit of quick cleanup and a final test fitting, that was looking a lot better, but still wasn't quite what I wanted. So, as you do when you're creating something just out of thin air, as it were, you try things. So we tried adding another bit of tubing to the setup, and don't love it. So reversed course just a little bit, went back, I took out that center piece and redid it without a hole in it, or just made it look more like the stuff that was already there. Still wasn't completely happy, but I wanted to go ahead and move on, and hopefully the inspiration would come to me to fix it once I got a little further down the road. Since the structure was more or less there, it was time to go ahead and start surfacing it. So mixed up some concoction of some little bit of PVA glue, some water, and just common plaster of Paris, and then give that a little bit of color, and then a quick adjustment for consistency, and then started giving everything a good thin coat. Since my vision for this display base isn't, it's not fully formed yet at this point, so I wanted to sort of sneak up on the next step, the next process. So the layers were intentionally thin so that I could build them up, make it a little heavier here, a little lighter there, because it's just easier to add a little bit more here than it is to have to scrape something off there, especially after it's dried. Once I had an idea of what it was going to look like, I was able to kind of move to the next step and put it on a little thicker. So actually going to, layer it heavier in some areas so that, I want to hide some details of the styrofoam underneath, and then, sort of smooth things out in some places that didn't just quite look right. Again, still working with the process of kind of sneaking up on it. So put down a layer, let it dry, come back, take a look at it, and then, if you need it, put down another layer. I guess the whole point I'm trying to make here is that this is a hobby, so don't get in a hurry. If you're just gathering and slathering, you're going to end up outpacing your vision, and you could get lost and, end up somewhere other than where you wanted to go. Oh, hey, here's a thing. Tools that were designed for one thing that you're using for another. This little spatula I'm using here to fill in some of the cracks and stuff is designed for doing art on fingernails. Yeah. works great for this. Once I cleaned up the front a little bit, I think I'm pretty much there as far as the texture of the surface goes, and so let everything dry and then come back and take a look at it. While I have gotten the structure and the texture where I want it, that piece of tubing was still bugging the hell out of me, and just couldn't get past it, so it had to be replaced. So went digging around in, really much anywhere I could think of around my studio and the house to see what I could come up with, and ended up with these 3D prints that were either extra or just flat out failures. If you've ever seen my bench top tool stand video, you might recognize the black tubes, but the one in the middle there was a failed print of a piece of lock line that I was playing with. Just didn't work. And so anybody that's ever looked at FDM printing knows that these things have a texture caused by the layer lines. So how do you deal with that? So I tested a couple of things on another piece of that scrap lock line, and we tried just PVA glue, just coated it in PVA glue with a brush and left it to dry, and then I coated it with PVA glue and sand, and the texture was it was a little too crunchy, so I needed a finer aggregate and ended up with baking soda that worked fabulous with a little thin down PVA glue. Once you had the glue on it, you just sprinkle on the baking soda until the whole thing's covered, and voila, texture. I thought it looked really good on this small piece, but it looked even better on the larger ones. Once I had everything coated, then I needed to lock everything in place, so I went with 2 heavy coats of a thinned down polyurethane. So everything got another couple of coats of Vallejo's gray surface primer. So the video's getting a little long here, and you've been listening to me ramble for a while, so I think we're going to make this a 2-part video. But I will release them both at the same time, so as soon as you're done here, the next one is waiting right there for you, and enjoy it. Thank you for joining me, and go make something.